Your last. Okay, welcome back, folks. This is Health Corrections and Institutions. It is after 12 o'clock on Friday, January 30th. We are working through a little bit. We're going to be taking a late lunch. We have with us James Duffy. He's catching his breath. It is James, not John.
It is. Yeah, James. Thank you. Yeah.
James Duffy is with the Joint Fiscal Office. And he really staffs more of the Appropriations Committee, which deals with the general fund budget. Our bill is intertwined with the general fund budget to a certain extent because we have the cash. And it's appropriations that appropriates the cash. We don't appropriate it. And James has been talking to some of the other committees in terms of what the budgeting process is, how it operates. I'm assuming from the time the administration puts out the requests in the fall to how it gets developed and then presented to us as the legislature, and then just how the budgeting works, I'm assuming. I thought it would be really important for this committee to hear this. We're part of that budget, though he's not going to focus in on the capital bill. It's on the general fund, because I think it's really important for all members to understand what the process is for developing the general fund big bill. So James, it's all yours. If you could introduce yourself for the record, we won't beat up on you too much. It's all
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate that. For the record, James Duffy, Joint Fiscal Office. It's a pleasure to be here with you all today. And thank you for the introduction. Yes, so I worked at JFO last year on the revenue team, on the revenue side of things. This year, I'm on the budget team at JFO, specifically staffing House appropriations. And in that capacity, JFO has been assisting Chair Shai and the committee members of House Appropriations with putting out some new guidance to executive branch departments and agencies this year at the beginning of the legislative budget cycle to improve. The goal is the responsiveness of the information that you all will receive from executive departments and agencies when they come to present their general fund. Oh, sure.
No, this is a good place to interrupt, because I've got 5 members of this committee who have been tasked to look at this new way of asking questions to figure out their budgets. So this is really important to Connor, who's not here, and Mary, and Brian, and Joe, and Kevin, to really pay attention to this, because this is going to help you.
And I read the slide. It's pretty explicit.
Well, sometimes people like to hear it too.
And so hopefully, this is the first year that these new instructions went out. It was a memo sent at the beginning of the legislative budget cycle back in October. Of course, the budget cycle itself starts about 9 months before the legislature ever even hears from the governor with his recommended budget, right? I think that's always good to keep in mind, that this is a train that has been moving for about 9 months by the time legislators see the GovRec, right? Agencies start working with central administration in the governor's office, receiving instructions from the administration on how they prepare their budgets, looking at their forecasts, their caseloads, different, if you're agency human services, what are you forecasting for caseload and service utilization in the year, right? And of course, those forecasts always change. That's why we have a budget adjustment. That forecast is a forecast. It's never 100%. But that's a process that's very much in progress by the time you all hear from agencies and departments. But this is being the first year with new instructions. Hopefully you all will be pleased with the format that agencies are coming to you as they present their general fund requests. And on the other side of things, right? So we have hopefully improved some of the communication going out as requests together members here to help your question information you seek from them. A copy of that memo was received by policy committee chairs and vice chairs a couple of weeks ago. I sent a copy to be posted on your website. I also have a hard copy that I'll pass around. I know folks have differing appetites for hard copies of things, but I always bring them in case. And if you wouldn't like a copy, feel free to. Oh, sure. Just leave it on the table and I'll grab them on my way out. Good. So this might not be new information to you all.
No, okay.
And I think some of the suggestions here, feel free to take a look. I won't run through them exhaustively point by point, but feel free to peruse, ask any questions that come up for you. Some of them may seem, but I think they're still useful to ground asking agencies to start with describing the problem, right? Sometimes, this doesn't happen all the time, sometimes you might receive a general fund request, a one-time general fund request meant to solve some pressing crisis issue in a department or agency. And folks don't always know how much background you do or do not have on that particular area of departmental operations. And agencies, they're subject matter experts much of the time, they're in the weeds every day. And as with any subject matter expert, sometimes it's useful to try to pull folks back and say, wait, we're not operating from the same set of assumptions and background information here. Explain for the committee the history of this problem, what problem you're trying to solve with this appropriation, for example. And don't be afraid to do that. Don't assume that you should know if they're kind of starting in the middle of the narrative in that way. I think again, I'm not going to go through these exhaustively, but another way to start peeling back the onion of an appropriations request and starting to figure out what the committee's priorities are asking questions like, what happens if we don't do this? Who suffers? What new functions can we not perform? What might we have to peel back if we don't make this appropriation? Are we losing services that are currently provided? Are we failing to expand services? That sort of thing. And that kind of counterfactual poking and prodding might help you kind of uncover your own priorities. And I'm starting to use the word priorities because I'm going to shift now to the next kind of part of this conversation, which is after you hear from departments and agencies over the next few weeks, you will be asked by the House Appropriations Committee to provide a committee letter to help guide their appropriations decisions. And this is where the team effort of the legislative committees really comes into play, right? You all are subject matter experts in your budget area. House appropriators are operating at a 30,000-foot level for a lot of the time, right? They have to make decisions about funding and appropriation across the entire city government. There's more information than they can ever possibly wrap their arms around themselves without all of your help. And so the budget letter is like kind of the key memorialization of your advice as the experts in your budget area on what you recommend. It's a budget better than I think people see in a couple of fiscal years. And so this year, more perhaps even than recent years, getting firm recommendations of priorities and funding priorities from policy committees will really help the appropriations process go smoothly. I think the challenge with being a policy committee and hearing from the departments and agencies that you know well and getting, $2 million requests for one times is they all sound really worthwhile and worth doing. Maybe often they do, most of them do. But a budget letter that doesn't prioritize requests is much harder for the appropriations committee to work with when they're up at 11 o'clock at night trying to decide how they can allocate the remaining $500,000 that we have for one times, just totally hypothetically. So I think the one thing I would say to the committee regarding the policy letters, to the extent that you all can consider like a tiered approach or a contingent list, right, for things that you recommend funding requests out of the general fund that you recommend the committee consider, say, these are our top priorities for this reason, right? Our first priority as a committee was maintaining current services. And so we recommend these funding requests to do that. Then we prioritize expanding services that would be new, but we think are particularly vital, for example. That sort of scheme is much more helpful to appropriators in those kind of game time decisions than receiving an unprioritized or untiered list of recommendations. And you're all familiar with what those requests might be. Maybe they're from general fund, from the administration, maybe you're hearing from outside advocates. Maybe there are bills out there floating that have appropriations attached to them. All of that would be really helpful to see reflected in committee letters. Again, I apologize if any of this is new. I know many of you have been through this process several times by now, but just spreading the good word and the good word of the basics to policy committees ahead of communication that you'll be receiving from House Appropriations in the next several weeks. I think you all can expect to hear from Chair Shai with policy committee instructions on sending your policy letters in the next week or two. In the past, I think committees have submitted their policy letters to the Appropriations Committee about by the last week of February. So we'll be at February project.
Okay. Joe. I said, Joe.
I answered the word. But so in our case, we're kind of a hybrid. So it's not so much that, so I think a more appropriate question for this committee would be like, how much of the cash that's proposed by the administration to be directed to the capital bill, this appropriations need.
Yeah, and thank you for that question, because I should have clarified at the beginning. I know you all have your own kind of separate but related cycle with this, right? Like you put together the capital bill, which is folded into the big bill. I'm not as familiar with all of your work on the capital bill. Scott is our kind of subject matter expert on that. I reviewed your committee letter from last year, and I'm aware that there are kind of general fund requests that I think exist outside of the capital appropriations process. Which is why I'm most prepared to speak to, but I do see Scott is in the room, so maybe.
But well, just to restate the question.
Yeah.
So bonded dollars live here. Okay, they don't get, but cash is appropriated by appropriations.
Mhm.
Although there's some the administration proposes to use here, that's at the discretion of appropriations. So last year we had some of the cash travel to the general fund that was originally earmarked for here.
Mhm.
And so the corollary of that is obviously we can't fund as much stuff if we don't have the money to fund it with. So it's kind of like inverse to what it would be for a standard policy committee.
Right.
Maybe the question could be, what would be the contingency list for things we wouldn't fund? I don't know.
I think you're talking in terms, we're a dual money committee and policy.
Yes.
So in our world of the capital world, we work a lot with BGS. So appropriations committee is going to ask us to look at the BGS operating budgets. So that's what the five of you will be looking at is the BGS operating budgets, not connected to our capital bills, not connected to the cash fund. It is their operations. And general fund dollars support their operations. They have a lot of divisions. They have a lot of moving pieces. It's not just taking care of buildings and mowing lawns. They have risk assessment in there. They have printing. They have property management. They have the fleet for our vehicles. They have so much. And those are the areas that the committee needs to figure out what questions do we need to ask of BGS when they come in to talk about their general fund budget. Then we have DOC, which is a whole different world. They have a lot going on in their general fund. And general fund's about 240 million. So it's all general fund, very little, if any, federal. They're providing a lot of services. So for the five that are working on this, you got to figure out what are all the things that DOC is providing, and then we have to do a deeper dive into that and say, are these programs working? Are they being effective? How long have we had? That's what I think we need to get at that appropriations committee wants. Is that correct?
Yes, and thank you both for that clarification. That is the piece that I'm speaking to today. You all have your own kind of domain over the bonded items in the capital budget.
Right.
Yes, but that's exactly right. Agency budgets, DOC, BGS, their base budget proposals, any one-time requests that might be attached to their agencies, that sort of thing.
So this is an example we saw last year, and it wasn't the intent of the testimony, but it was a derivative. There are some electric vehicles in BGS that nobody drives because they don't like them. So would that be appropriate to make a recommendation? Why are we?
That would be a question that you five would come up that we would need as a full committee to ask BGS when they come in to talk about their general fund budget. Is
So
that the thinking, James, that something like that?
Yeah, and that's certainly within all of your discretion, right? That is kind of your area of the budget as it pertains to the general fund, and those kind of oversight and follow-up questions on program implementation.
so that's not too granular.
No.
I would say,
Thanks.
I just.
and you all have your own.
Their fleet service is a big part of state government. They have all the fleet vehicles, and any state government part, department or agency that wants a vehicle for an employee to go somewhere, they have to go through BGS to get that vehicle. So BGS is the home of our fleet vehicles. So if they've got issues, is it working having so many electric vehicles? That's the question that you five could come up with and say, for the fleet, These are the questions that we as a committee need to ask us. That's a program.
And this is the art, I think, of gathering information that is ultimately sent to the appropriations committee, right? That sounds like a completely appropriate oversight and program implementation follow-up question that's well within the committee's purview. Is it attached to a funding item for that given year? Is it attached to, an appropriation line item? Is it a salient feature of their budget request that year? Maybe, maybe not. I'm not familiar, with that particular example. I don't know if it is. So, some things might be well within your purview as oversight over these particular agencies, but not as pertinent to that year's budget cycle and the appropriations considerations before the committee, House appropriations. And that's where your all kind of approach to how you facilitate that testimony in committee becomes the art of getting the information you need for your policy or for your committee letter to House appropriations, and what you, kind of conduct here as
Well,
part of your
I just at the risk of beating up on that example. So if you're up, and I've run 80, 90 unit fleets. So, I mean, you've got acquisition costs, but you have ongoing overhead costs. You have individual unit utilization, like are the units we're just not using, the overall utilization, what are your disposal opportunities? So just because you're not acquiring something doesn't mean that there isn't overhead involved with owning a unit. There's a concept called basically the cost of a parking space. So you look at the operational cost of your fleet and then divide it by the number of units you have with all your overhead, and you're like, well, this vehicle costs me $43 a day to be parked here, and we're using it whatever 4 days a month. Is that a good value?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the other thing that speaks to is one-time versus base. Like it's easy to scrutinize one-time appropriations because they're all itemized and neatly presented in the GovRec. Base kind of accretes over time, and it can become difficult to follow up on things that are nested in a departmental base, such as fleet operations.
Do people understand when he's saying the base versus the time? Folks understand
I
that?
think I do, but
It's your variable cost, basically. It's your operational expense. I think it's-
Yeah,
Can you explain it a little?
Sure. So with one times, I'm still coming up with a way to explain one times. It's a one-time appropriation, right? But it is a single discrete, fiscal year appropriation. Maybe there's carry forward authority into future fiscal years. But it's a one-time request. It expires, it reverts to general fund at a certain
So
point.
it's a one fiscal year.
Yes, maybe, and again, there can be carry forward, but basically for a short heuristic, it's one fiscal year. Base is the foundational department budget that carries over from one year to the next. That includes salary, fringe, benefits, building maintenance, all of those things that are baked into the core agency budget. That's then the foundation for the next year's
It doesn't go
budget
away.
construction.
They're the-
It
yeah.
persists over time. Yeah.
So
let me
yesterday,
try. The
Yep.
governor's executive directive to generate a report of all the properties that may or may not be usable for affordable housing was a one-time occurrence. Now, we're
That-
trying to change it.
that was different.
It's not a budget.
That's not a
I'm using it as
budget.
an example, that would be a one-time cost, that unless we change it and say, do it for 5 more years, that would be a one-time expenditure. And after that, it's done.
But its EO wasn't funding based.
And it's not funding based. So an example,
It was absorbed within the existing organization, but, okay.
That's not.
But if you went back to the car, so purchasing the car for fleet is a one-time appropriation. But the overhead, be it personnel or space or maintenance for that car, that's base, because that's part of your ongoing.
One would
budget.
assume, yeah. You would hope that that's what the agency is doing, right? If you award them one-time funds, they're considering the implications for base going forward. That's another very good and important question to ask.
so yesterday we had Jay in here, pretrial supervision. In the FY 25 budget, we appropriated 600,000. Right? To get
Yes.
that project completed.
We did.
So they added in this year's FY 27, the administration wants 200,000. So the question is that 600,000 that was in FY 25 budget, is that in the base? So that so there's a $600,000 appropriation in the FY 26 budget. That's the first thing. If there isn't, then that 600,000 was a one-time.
Right.
So the 200,000 that's being asked for FY 27 is that part of the base? Or is that a one-time? So that's the differentiations between base.
How are
The
you-
base is your ongoing appropriation.
And just one more thought. So you getting corrections. I think last year's budget is a little, the current fiscal year is a little over $200 million in aggregate. I think 215 is the number 6 in my head, but don't quote me. But would it be appropriate to say, right now, we just, in the BAA had just passed the House today, there's a overrun for well pass because of a higher population within the facilities. Would it be appropriate to say, so we're just given that figure, we're not given the contract. Like, would it be appropriate to say, we want to see the contract?
That's
I mean,
entirely
it's
within your
an
discretion.
it's an 8-figure item annually, which,
Well,
Could ask for the contract.
Mhm. And I think
Well, I-
we should.
that's the purpose of this conversation, yes, but it's.
Yeah, that would be completely appropriate for your role. Absolutely. I think the question that I would leave you all with, or the challenge I would pose to you all with, is to look at the time you have the agencies and departments in committee, and remember too that you can always talk to them offline. You can ask JFO to help you get information, to follow up on a question you have. Your time with them in the room is often quite brief. And so you might have something that is very, it's a good line to follow up on and pursue, but can be done outside of committee, either through request to the agency or through working with JFO to get you more information. If you want a copy of the contract, you want to know the expenditures on that contract. And to exercise that judgment, like, what do I want recorded in the meeting? And do I want all of my fellow committee members to hear? And what can I, follow up on afterwards? And, there's an art to that. And it's also up to your own judgment and how you all want to run your committee. But that's the consideration I would leave you with for that.
So Will,
just
and then
real
Mary.
quick, I think, James, that was a good point that you made about how, the base funding carries over to the following year, but you can still change it as long as you're able to dive into it and really know
Yes.
what those core costs are. So I forget what last year's breakdown was. I thought it was 221 million of base funding and about 14 or 15 million in one-time funding for DOC when we
I
did
don't think
that.
they had
But-
much one time.
And maybe I have that wrong. It added up to about 230 something million dollars. I thought it was that breakdown. But then we just did the BAA, which adjusted that the base funding
Right.
for the, okay.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about adjusting base funding in the BAA is generally you actually can't do base adjustments in the BAA. Things will live in the base section, but unless that base is then proposed in the next full fiscal year bill, if it's base adjustments in the BAA, it's effectively a one-time unless it's reproposed in the following year's full fiscal year budget. That's like a small nuance.
Yeah, no.
But that's, you're right, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. And there's one thing, but it just slipped my mind. Hopefully I'll remember when we check.
So what we have established here is 5 members of this committee are going to be working with this memo to figure out what questions we should be asking as a committee when BGS comes in. So we would need an idea of their divisions and not departments, but divisions, their responsibilities, so that we know, and the 5 folks here would help the rest of us. They'd come back and say, these are the questions that kind of need to be asked of these different divisions or operations that they do. And then the same thing for DOC. So it's to help us spend when that department comes in with their general fund budget request. We as a whole committee at least know some direction in terms of what to ask of the person. So we're not starting from scratch. That's what these 5 folks need to focus on.
Is there a way to get to, after asking a question, sometimes as I'm sitting here and I don't want to determine whether someone in the agency's trying to hide the information or whatever they're doing, but they're not maybe giving you the full picture. How do you dig that out deeper, or do you go through you folks in joint fiscal kind of help us get that information? Because I've sat through testimony even this week that I was like, like, okay, you've got the money, but we haven't accomplished it. So what are we doing with it?
You're winning,
Yeah.
sir.
You know, and so that's the challenge for me. We can write the questions and I think we'll do an appropriate job. But are there areas within agencies that they could say to us, oh, that's off limits? Is there anything off limits, first of all?
You want to answer, Scott?
I can chime in, Morrissey. For the record, Scott Moore, joint fiscal office. One of the things that we do, as you know, repo committee, and you've seen us. We have access to look at all what they're called the debt IDs, which is the number assigned to that dollar amount to say $400,000 for this study. Did you do anything with it? So we can look and see what expenditures were expended. So every one of these departments is gonna have a business manager. So you can ask them, show me the accounting of what you were given and where it is. Now, a lot of what you hear, the capital bill is project-based, right? And when say like, oh, you know, the Windsor Courthouse, how much money did you get? How much money did you spend? What are you gonna do with it? But for some of these other aspects, you could ask BGS, you know, not Joe necessarily, because she does the construction stuff, but Emily or Wanda might be able to say, for the fleet management, for the security, give me that cost breakdown. Show me the cash flow kind of thing. And that's where I would go if you had those kind of questions.
Yeah, just wondering like how granular we're gonna get on this stuff, right? So like,
Yeah.
so DOC comes in
Mhm.
and it's like, we got this program Divas. It's a full-time position and 2 3/4 full position. We get to throw a grant through DOC. Like, will that grant appear on any, or is it just gonna be lumped into a big line item? DOC grants, you know, it's.
From the point of view of what I see in the accounting systems, there should be specific department IDs assigned to all of them. But the tricky part is understanding what the numbers mean and how it applies, because sometimes you'll see even on the capital bill repo reallocations, it says BGS various projects. Great, what various projects?
Right.
Or you might see a, you know, DOC grant, 2025 grant, even the cultural, historic barn grants, that kind of stuff, what we have in the capital bill to just say 2025 grant, you know, artist council grant, so it's there, but sometimes you have to dig a little bit more and understand when you see the report, what the numbers mean and how that applies to the line item in the actual bill, because the budget will say X amount of money to trying to make something up, Vermont Arts Council for their 2025 grant programs. And the debt IDs tie back to the budget bill, so you should be able to find them.
So it's tough because like, you know, we need to have some background to even know what to ask for, right? Like, so it's a bunch of grants. Is it like a question of how far do you go? Because there's probably $25,000 grants from DOC too. So is it all grants over a certain level we're looking at? And we ask them for a list to space it out. And then how much do we go into each one of those? You know, it could be like, this could be a whole session, you know? Like,
This could
right?
be-
Everybody wants to weigh in here.
But
This could be a whole.
But to
volume.
me, you're asking that question because you're curious. So guess what? As the 5 of you, that's a question in my mind. Do you ask them offline? We don't have to spend an hour of committee time doing it, but that's the things that we go and talk to them and say, hey, listen, this is various items. Can you break this down for us in more detail? And you guys give us,
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with that.
I mean, I guess I'm wondering what the folks downstairs or upstairs want from us, you know?
Well, James may be able to answer that. What do they want from us in terms of Connor's question? You went through it a little bit at the beginning. You kind of missed that.
So how would we prioritize, being that we've got the time frame? We'll be marking up the budget, you said in like 3 weeks.
Yeah, well, the letter will be coming out prior to that.
Right, I know that, but I'm saying, so how do we, the group is going to have to obviously start next week immediately to get this.
But you're not doing the work for the committee.
I know.
You're setting the framework in terms of what questions we should ask. So it's not that you're gonna find the answers.
No, we know.
It's the framework of what questions we all need to
All right.
ask.
And it's like stuff like the question you were asking yesterday, Chair, like, okay, you're going down to the Big E once a week, you know? Are you coding that separately? Is that part of the project, you know? You can, like, this stuff you could spend,
Oh, Along-
James, do you want to answer?
Oh, wait, I'll add one consideration. I mean, these are all big questions, right? Like, how do I allocate our scarce time? How do I decide, you know, big picture question, do I focus on the granular operations of this unit? The frustrating answer is, it depends. But I would say this, one, JFO is always a resource if you want to dive deep, and we can help, as Scott said, we can help do some of the middleman work in connecting with the business managers who have that information. Two, I would say the line for you all is, what information do I need personally to feel like I can make an informed recommendation to the appropriations committee on how we prioritize funding requests? Maybe for you, that means you have to go really deep on how something is working, right? Maybe it means you stick to the 30,000-foot picture of, what does your program do? What happens when you don't do it? Okay, great. That's enough information for me. So I would say it depends on the individual committee member and the committee itself, what information you all need to feel like you're making an informed recommendation to the appropriations.
Exactly.
Brian, you had your hand up, and then Will had his hand up, and I think Joe.
And then I do have to get, I should just check the time. I should get out of here. in the next minute.
We can have you back.
Yeah, I'm more than happy to come back.
In a brief, so if we dig too hard, you just say, I'm here in the name of House Appropriations and JFO.
What was that? I'm sorry.
It's not my turn.
Brian, and then.
It's
Will.
not necessarily for our guest. I mean, we've been given first principles by JFO. It seems to me to get the questions that you want, we need to hear from the vice, from you, and from the scheduler, what we've got in the coming week. Right? There's no in between right now. There's
We
nothing to
haven't
create
had a
right now.
letter yet from Probst in terms of what is being proposed in the general fund budget. They're going to be getting that out, I would assume, by the end of next week, because they've been working on
That sounds about right.
So we don't know we know there's 200,000 for the pretrial supervision, that we know. But you're looking at their budgets in general, not just the ups and downs.
I understand. I just think there's no there yet.
Right. So Will and
It's a-
then Joe.
Does appropriations have a template for how they want us to prioritize all the funding? Is there a scale? Do we just make up our own way of doing it? Like, is there any preferred method that you guys have?
Not as far as I'm aware, but I do know that there are all the previous policy committee letters are on the House Appropriations website. I can share the link with the committee if it's helpful to look at examples. Every committee has done it in their own way historically. I don't think House Appropriations want to impose a particular template
It'll
on
be
it.
the way you list it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Right.
What is your priority?
Right. Yeah.
So then that's what I had in
I've
mind.
also seen it done as buckets, like, we prioritize this bucket of things and that bucket of things in no particular order within those categories.
Upstairs, we've done high, medium, and low. You're right. It's how you choose to do it.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Joe,
No, I'm good.
you're good?
Okay.
So I really appreciate that. I know we have you scheduled and you've been pulled in all different directions, but we are also a money committee, so
Right.
we kind of understand some of the moving pieces, but I wanted the folks to have a better understanding of the general fund in general, because I know that pops up questions for the committee. So as said, we've got 5 members as a subcommittee, just kind of looking through to come up with some questions that we need to ask as a full committee, not for them to get the answers, but in order of the structure of how we as a committee need to approach BTS when they come in with their operational budget, when we see the approach document, the same with DOC. So would you be available to these 5 folks if they've got some questions as they start working?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. That's absolutely JFO's role.
Have them understand this?
Yeah. Scott is always, we're happy to tag team requests from the committee. And the truth is there's 17 people at JFO. So you send a question to one person, it's going to find its way to the right person. But Scott, myself on the budget side of things, we're both happy to do what we can. I'll also just make a quick plug. You may know this already, but the House Appropriations Committee members each have a buddy system kind of, right? But you have a liaison to House Appropriations. So I see Representative LaRoche is your budget buddy for BGS, and Representative Squirrel is he handles DOC. So those are 2 big
Yep.
areas. For
We
you all.
already have our 2 people.
Yeah, if you look right over on our dry erase board.
I love that.
So we have 2 folks to work with Trevor.
My heart still.
We have
He's taking it to Wilfred.
Representative Winters and
Not
Swan.
because we're efficient, we just can't remember.
That's correct.
Just highlight those if you want to coordinate with House Appropriations, know what your counterparts that your liaisons are working on and asking might be helpful to compare notes.
And it would be really helpful when BGS comes to present their budget downstairs as well as DOC, the liaisons are there. Really important. For that.
Thank you all for having me.
Thank you so
Yes,
much.
right.
Made you late.
Oh, no, I enjoyed my time here.
James, we'll call you back.
Thank you very much.
So before we finish, folks, so Kevin and Sean, please reach out to Trevor to find out when DOC's budget's going to be presented.
Okay.
So you can be there. And then Gina's not in today. And we'll reach out to Gina and make sure she checks with Wayne for when the meetings, and that would be a good starting point as well. One other thing before we leave, H540, it's a reparative program working group. House Judiciary did a walkthrough yesterday. And on a straw vote of 1103, they support the language.
1103.
80.
Oh,
Did I say
Yeah,
11?
you said that.
803,
Okay.
a straw vote, they support it.
Yep.
No changes. So I would like to vote that out on Tuesday, so if we
Okay.
could put that on the schedule. And you still
And I'm
want,
presenting, yeah, I'm speaking. I
you know
spoke to
what
Martin
bill we're
yesterday.
doing?
Yeah, yeah,
Are you,
yeah, I did actually, yeah, I did, yeah, I've spoken to Karen.
we'll have Troy's back up.
Oh,
I don't recall there being any sensitive flags on that.
It was
No.
nothing.
Yeah.
oh, my
It was
speech is
too easy.
beautiful. Yeah.
It's too easy.
Layup.
Kev, I made
it
I-
a note to.
on the issue of on the issue of the thing presentation we just had, multiple questions asked, and this is my take. I'd like to share them with you, even though you're hungry and I am too. Yes, we're in a conceptual phase, but everything in life is conceptual, right? I mean, until you get to the actual thing, it's conceptual. But as far as what to ask, James Ains, I think you did a great job of this. Like, every one of us is going to have something else that triggers us. Like, what do you know? Like, this doesn't sound right, or whatever. And there's big potatoes and small potatoes, and you ask how granular. If you're dealing with a company that bought millions of a lot more blades, you'd worry about $1 per blade. We don't. BGS, you're not going to ask them about the lawnmower blade, right? But if the car fleet, if they're spending X millions of dollars on the car fleet, that's a pretty reasonable thing to ask. But as James also said, if it's not in the budget this year, it's not going in our presentation. Doesn't mean you can't ask a question about what happened in the past, but it has nothing to do with this year's budget. And so you might say maintenance or whatever, yes, but that's not a line, that might not be the line item in the budget. So just hopefully that made sense, and maybe just people staring at me. That's fine. I mean, it's just an example. It can be anything, but it's conceptual. Like, you're gonna all have different questions. I have a different question maybe than somebody else has for the veterans home. We had to ask, we went deeper on a small potato in the scheme of things, items of the washer and dryer, right? Because we weren't getting the answers. But sometimes people have the answers, and that's not to pick on one person. So it really depends on what you're hearing from testimony or what you know about something that maybe somebody else doesn't know, where you're going to start drilling home. Maybe, Brian knows something about a specific part of BGS that I never even thought of. You bring it up. I mean, I don't know, but you know what I mean? So just, it's okay to ask the question. And also the really big part, I think Alice would agree with this. As little time as there is outside a committee, there's also questions if you have personal or more intricate details that, just make an appointment with Wanda or with Emily or whoever, Joe or whatever it is, or people in DOC. So anyway, that's my rambling. Sorry.
So we've got about 2 more weeks of testimony on the capital bill next week, and then a little odds and ends the following week, and then we're going to start up market.
Okay.
On capital bill. And I'm still going to be pushing to get some of our bills out. So next week we're going to be working on some bills, and good to go. Anything else? Have a
So
good week.
may I ask the question,
No.
if we, what is the 5 of us availability for Thursday noon on the 5th?
My Thursdays at noon are done, and so I got
So that's not good for you.
Thursdays are not.
That's a good example of an offline question. Because that's not for everybody in the committee. So that's
See,
5.
I give us-
Five of you, so it's
We're
really,
winding down. I'm trying to get to a place where.
Well, let's go out live. for it.
yeah.
That's
So
good.
there's five of you. That one's gonna be a dicey one. So if you need some time and you want some time when we got some things scheduled, we can work with Tate and me. Maybe we can bump some things around. It should be probably more towards the end of the week because you haven't gotten the budget yet.
But
Be getting the
Tuesday,
letter.
let's get together, the five of us, for even 10-15 minutes just to talk.
Yeah, you got
We're
plenty of
looking.
time on Tuesday. You have caucuses and then lunch. We're not back until.
God only knows, yeah, Tuesday.
Right, right.
This way we can come to.